Good evening. On behalf of Nari Division of Jacksonpal Pharma, we welcome you to the webinar today. Today's webinar is focused on exploring the latest in menopausal hormone therapy. The expert with us today will help unveil all the concerns around MHT. Before we begin the session today, there is an announcement. There will be a poll about midlife to gain valuable insights from diverse range of doctors across the country. The questionnaire is in 3 parts. Please participate in all the 3 polls, and at the end of the session, 5 lucky winners will be announced. By participating in the poll, you will be contributing to the National Midlife Population Awareness Survey under the banner of Tanveer Foundation. The survey has passed through Ethics Committee. Your results will be kept confidential, and we thank you in advance for your participation in the midlife survey through the poll. We welcome and express our gratitude to our expert today, Dr. Meeta Singh, Director and Consultant Obs and Gynae and Menopause Specialist at Tanveer Hospital, Hyderabad. Dr. Meeta has held various prestigious posts at the Indian Menopause Society, being National President IMS and founder Hyderabad Menopause Chapter. We look forward to all the doubts being cleared by her on MHT, as she is the expert chair of IMS guidelines on menopause and postmenopausal osteoporosis guidelines. Her interest in research and academics is seen as she holds posts of founder IMS Research Committee and currently founder chair IMS Registry for 10 years since 2021. Welcome and thank you, ma'am, for your commitment and support. Welcome and over to you, ma'am.
A very good evening to all of you, and I would like to thank Dr. Deepika Chabra and team from Jacksonpal for hosting this program. And a couple of reminiscences that I have. I've started my menopause journey in 2012, and Jacksonpal was a very important played a very important role in my presidential year. And of course, the menopause toolkit, I think that was actually coined by us in that tenure. And later on, the International Menopause Society, now they have come out with the toolkits much later than what we had done in 2012. If you remember, Deepika, we had come out with the guidelines on diet, guideline on the exercise, then a booklet and a proforma. So that's how the toolkit was actually developed first by our society in 2012. So we have a long, good history of more than 26, 27 years of standing the Indian Menopause Society. And all the past presidents and the entire team working at different areas in India have done tremendous work in the world of menopause. And today, it's a very much talked about topic, not only in India, but all over the world. So that makes it very important that everybody should know or have at least some running knowledge about menopause. So today we're going to talk about the latest. I'm not going to talk about menopause. We're going to talk about the menopause hormone therapy and a few advancements in hormone therapy. So yes, of course, this is entirely hosted by Jacksonpal, and menopause isn't that bad, and we can really do something about it. And so I wanted to inform the audience or, let them know that we have a very good website, indianmenopaussociety.org. And all these books are available on the site. And there is also a lot of more information which you can get from the site. We also have the various, material which will help you understand menopause better, help you understand hormone therapy better. So, and also give you an idea about what the Indian Menopause Society is doing at large. So my entire presentation is going to be something like this, where I'm going to talk about the take-home. First, start off with the take-home message. Then why MHT has always been so mysterious, and what is new, the evidence and the guidelines put together. The take-home message is actually, the target population. These first 2 or 3 slides are my favorite because they are going to give you a complete gist of what I have to say in the entire 45 minutes of my talk. So the target population for starting MHT is usually within 10 years of menopause. And menopause hormone therapy, when it is started in the early post-menopause period, in a healthy woman, is actually quite safe. But like any other medicine, supposing you give somebody antihypertensives, for a thyroid, you give them eltroxin. Like any of those drugs, MHT also needs to be used appropriately. It needs to be monitored. So you have to call them back. You have to follow them up. So that means you're not going to deprive women who are suffering from menopausal symptoms and who need the hormone therapy to be given to them. But of course, remember that it is not for everyone. And then, since it's not like a life and death situation, that's what we think. But yes, it does make a huge difference in the quality of life, not only in the quality of life, but also in the NCDs, as we are going to see in the next couple of slides, because it's not just the quality of life, but it will also prevent disorders, the NICDs, when it is given at the right time. So the informed choices between the doctor and your woman is very, very important. So put it in one line. So MHT is appropriate. MHT would be good if it is given to the right woman at the right age, the right kind of MHT you choose, the right dose and the right route. And all this can change in the same woman as she ages. So there are different ways of doing it. Now, the risks and benefits is what you're worried about. So women aged less than 50, if she is healthy, definitely the benefits are far better. Even between 50 and 60, the benefits are far better. Only after she is beyond 10 years post-menopause or more than 60 years, and especially if she's got comorbidities, then you have to analyze and see whether the benefits of hormone therapy are better or the risk of the treatment is more. So that needs to be individualized. Maybe after the age of 70, if none of us are going to really start in India hormone therapy per se. And now, anyway, 10 years ago, the lifespan was 60. The average age that a woman would expect to live was 65, 66. Now it has improved to 72. So this really wouldn't apply for our population. Now, I would really ask all of you, and maybe in the survey that we're going to do, as to how much of use of MHT do you use for, say, menopausal symptoms, for the genital urinary syndrome, for the prevention of osteoporosis, or even treatment of osteoporosis at menopause transition, and for premature ovarian insufficiency. So if you're using all of them, then I would be really very happy to listen to that. But if you're not using it, please start addressing this issue. Please start learning about it. It is not rocket science. It is something which can be easily hormone therapy, learning hormone therapy can be easily monitored. And this is the area where medical intervention is needed. Yes, because menopause is definitely a natural phenomena, but there are some women who need medication, and those are the women we have to pick and choose, and that is how you're going to take it forward. So a menopause clinic is very, very important. So you have to have, just like an antenatal clinic, we have a gynae clinic, gynops clinic. Now in the gynops clinic, we kind of, segregate a woman, but we kind of do multitasking in that. We don't have to specialize, but even in your regular practice, you must have this approach for all 40 plus women, they would fall into midlife. And then you have your thought process, which goes into the menopause. And how do we approach it? Yes, you need to have some special stuff, just like how you would look at, you can't run an antenatal clinic without a fetoscope, or a fetal monitor now, of course, and a simple ultrasound. And you also definitely will have a weighing machine. So similarly, just like you have these few gadgets which are important for running an antenatal clinic, similarly, you would need something for your menopause clinic. And what are the basic requirements? The core team is yourself, but you definitely need to have help, just like for AMCs, and visiting consultants in case you have some problems, some comorbidities, you need some cross referrals. Very, very simple. You just need your table, a measuring tape, weighing machine, BP apparatus, small speculums, pap smear, HPV kits, and a simple lab collection and stationery. And of course, now it's good to have everything recorded online. And this is the menopause performer that we use and to document it is important that you document everything so that the follow-up is there regularly. And it's very good for your understanding. And this is the toolkit that we say that we have introduced recently in the 2020 guidelines. Apart from the menopause performer, you also have the risk assessment tools. These are some of the risk assessment tools which I'm going to talk about later. And I think we are the only society who is actually promoting this kind of a concept of running a menopause clinic. And now coming to MHT, what is MHT's menopause hormone therapy? So all the guidelines, Indian Menopause Society, NAMS, International Menopause Society, all of them are agreeable into most of the indications that are there. And all of us agree that vasomotor symptoms is on the top of the list at menopause transition. The GSM also equally true. Low bone mass at risk of fracture. And even those at risk of fracture, low bone mass means osteopenia. We are using the term at risk of fracture means all those who have got osteoporosis at menopause transition, hormone therapy can still be used. And when to do it, when to stop, what is the dose, what is the highlight, all of them, we are kind of concurrent, all the societies are concurrent that hormone therapy is a must when indicated. But what is new now? The new is the terminology. Earlier, we used to say hormone replacement therapy. Now, the term that we need to use is menopause hormone therapy. Why? Because hormone replacement is something that you are replacing in a deficiency, like diabetes and hypothyroid, or in premature ovarian insufficiency, because there the woman needs this high dosage of hormones, which she is lacking because of the premature deficiency. There you need to replace it. Whereas here, it is not a deficiency. It is what everybody undergoes. The estrogens are coming down, but every woman reacts to it differently. So some women may need a little supplement. So that is the reason we got a special term, which is called menopause hormone therapy. And ET is estrogen therapy, EP is estrogen progesterone therapy, AT is androgen therapy, SERM is selective estrogen receptor modulator, and that is the bezidoxivin, which we don't have in the market here. Tibolone is the selective tissue estrogenic activity regulator, which is called the STEER. And one molecule has all three effects. So, a little bit on the basic pharmacology before we move on to the MHT. That is, the natural estrogens are the MHT, the natural estrogen, the native estrogen, that is the 17 beta estradiol. 17 beta estradiol is what is found in the body. So that is why it is called the bioidentical hormone. 17 beta estradiol, estradiol valerate. Then the other one is the estriol, which is present more than the 17 beta estradiol after menopause. And estetriol is the E4, which is coming from the placenta in utero. So this is E4, which is a very least potent molecule. Whereas the conjugated equine estrogen is actually not a bioidentical hormone because it is coming from the pregnant mare's urine. So it has got different types of estrogens which are put together. So that is the biggest difference between the conjugated equine estrogen and the 17 beta estradiol. Having said that, conjugated equine estrogen is an effective hormone and it is a natural estrogen. It is not a synthetic estrogen, which is seen in the oral contraceptive pill. There it is the ethinyl estradiol. The ethinyl estradiol is far more potent than the natural estrogens. And that is the reason why we are not going to use the ethinyl estradiol post-menopause. And I will show you a couple of slides. Why not? Because ethinyl estradiol is 750 to 1,000 times more potent than the natural estrogens at the tissue levels. It enhances the hepatic effects, which increases the synthesis of the clotting factors, the angiotensin, the sex hormone binding globulin, and these effects do not change by the route of administration. That means whether you give this ethinyl estradiol orally, or you're giving a vaginal dose, or you're giving a transdermal dose, the effect on the blood, on the hepatic enzymes is there. So the reasons why we are not using is because of the high potency. So the chances of thromboembolism, chances of developing blood pressure, and increased amount of sex hormone binding globulin, mopping up everything, giving rise to a kind of an amenorrhea picture can also happen when you're giving this ethinyl estradiol. So now, coming back to the potency, Estradiol is the least potent. Conjugated equine estrogen contains a mixture of estrogens, and 0.625 is equivalent to 2 mg of oral estradiol. Estradiol is 80 times more potent than estriol, which is the E3. So, E2 is the most potent, that is the estradiol, and that is what we are using for the menopause. Estrone is the least potent, and E3 is the least potent. E4 is much more less. So we have to understand the potency of the different hormones which are present in the body. So the ratio changes from estrone to estradiol. Estradiol is the majority of the circulating hormone in the reproductive phase, whereas estrone, the ratio is 1:2. Post-menopause, the estradiol levels decrease, whereas the estrone levels increase. Having said that, we are going to use in post-menopause the estradiol, but in very small doses, so that it mimics the dose that is necessary in the bloodstream to act at the tissue level. So we need to understand the different potencies. The post-WHI, there was a lot of talk about the different doses, saying that high dose or standard dose of conjugated equine estrogen can cause problems, whereas when you're using the low dose and the ultra low dose, which maintains the benefits, but avoids the side effects. That is how the low dose therapy and the different potencies have come into being. And this is exactly like how you would look at the ethinyl estradiol potency when you're looking into the oral contraceptive, which is absolutely not new for all the gynecologists who prescribe the contraceptive pills for various reasons. We understand that we have come down from 50 micrograms to 15 micrograms of ethinyl estradiol without losing the efficacy. Similarly, even in menopause, the doses have come down without losing the efficacy. So estradiol, 17 beta estradiol, ultra low dose is 0.5, low dose is 1, the standard dose is 2, and high dose is 4. So for each one of them, there are different indications as to how to choose the kind of dose that you're going to use. This is what is called the individualization of treatment for any woman who comes to you at menopause. So this slide shows the superiority of 17 beta estradiol hydrate versus the valerate and the conjugated equine estrogen. I'm not going to go into the details, but then it is chemically and biologically similar to the endogenous hormone and rapidly absorbed. So what is the role of progesterone? The role of progesterone in hormone therapy is simply to reduce the risk of endometrial hyperplasia and cancers associated with unopposed estrogen therapy. So this is what happens, and that is how even in PCOS now we are finding a lot of these endometrial hyperplasias, even cancers at the age of 35 because of the high incidence of PCOS, and where we find unopposed estrogens, reduced levels of progesterone. But we don't want to induce that kind of a situation when we are giving estrogens for a woman with a uterus. So what we need to do is put them on a progesterone. So there are various types of progesterones, but the types of progesterones today in the world over that we are talking about is only 2 progesterones which are used for menopause. One is micronized progesterone, dydrogesterone. So both of them are neutral towards lipids. They reduce the postprandial increase in glucose, and we'll come to some slides where they have shown that giving the menopause hormone therapy actually can prevent the pre-diabetic to stay there and not become a diabetic. The advantage of a micronized progesterone is that it induces sleepiness when taken at bedtime, and all of us are well aware about it because when we give it to our women during pregnancy, some of them complain of increased sleepiness, but this could be converted into your advantage at menopause when a lot of women have sleep problems. So micronized progesterone probably would score over there. Now, it's very also important to understand that when you're talking about a progesterone and an estrogen, when you're trying to protect that endometrium, the dose that is needed of the progesterone depends on the amount of estrogen you're giving. So when you're giving a low dose estrogen, the amount of dydrogesterone is 5 milligrams. When you're giving it orally, when you're giving a micronized progesterone, it has to be 100 milligrams. If you're giving a high dose of estrogen, say you're giving moderate to high dose, that means you're giving 1 to 2 milligrams or 4 milligrams, then progesterone has to increase to 200 to even 300 if you're giving 4 mg of estrogen. So that is how you need to give the right dose of the progesterone depending upon the amount of estrogen you're giving to protect that lining of the cavity. Now, we just a couple of slides on how the micronized progesterone and the natural progesterone, that is the micronized progesterone and the dydrogesterone. As you can see in this slide, the effect on the breast cancer in the 208 French cohort study, they have shown that compared to the progestogens, because in the WHI, it was thought that the medroxyprogesterone is causing an increased risk of breast cancer, and estrogen alone does not cause an increase in breast cancer. But when from the European studies, they have found that actually micronized progesterone, the relative risk is only 1, and with the dydrogesterone, it is 1.16. So that means they have no effect on potentiating or increasing the risk of breast cancer. Similarly, the risk of thromboembolism associated with the progestogens is actually negated when we are using the micronized progesterone and the dydrogesterone. They have no effect on the liver enzymes, and that is how they score over these two areas. So this is the progesterone and the estradiol capsules that we have today by Jagsonpal. This is the only company which is producing the progesterone estradiol capsules. We have other companies which have the estradiol valerate and also the dydrogesterone combinations in various doses. And so the Jagsonpal have come out with estradiol 1 mg with a progesterone 100 mg, which is an appropriate dose. Now, this kind of a combination, they have got 30 tablets in this. So when we're using this combination, I'll tell you when we should be using. So 1 into 10 capsules, this is a 30-day course that you have. Now, we have to differentiate between what is bioidentical and what is a compounded hormone. Now, when you're talking about a compounded bioidentical hormone, one of my patients from America, she came and showed me these two things. I said, I took a permission and a picture of this. Now you see here, the Priyanka Garg applied 2 pumps, 0.5 mg, and they are available in different formulations. Progesterone is available as 250 milligrams of capsule. So you understand the compounded biomedical hormone actually doesn't follow the FDA or the universal safety precautions that need to be taken. They have not undergone the rigorous trials that needs to be done before a medication is out in the market. So that is the reason we should not be using the compounded bioidentical hormone. What you should be using is, so the bioidentical hormones are defined as substances that have exactly the same chemical and molecular structure as hormones that are produced in the human body. So any hormone can be made biomedical, but they are FDA approved. So what is the difference between an FDA approved and compounded bioidentical hormone? Particularly, this has been especially all over America, just like the quacks that we have in India. We have a lot of people producing this compounded bioidentical hormone, but I'm really, really very worried that they should not be dumping this into our country, because it will be very hard for us to monitor and to stop this kind of a practice. So the differences are, the FDA approved, the compounded are not FDA approved, they are not monitored for safety, for efficacy, and there is inefficient scientific evidence. So all the reasons for us doctors not to encourage the compounded bioidentical hormone, but we have to encourage the bioidentical hormone therapy, which is FDA approved. So that is the huge difference. So if you want, we can take a break here and go for the poll.
So my teammate, Mr. Amit Saxena, he's here, and he'll be putting up the first poll. We roll out this poll to get your personal details and also understand about participants' menopause hormone therapy awareness. This is as a pre-webinar survey. So if you can just quickly put down your specialty, you have to choose one: MBBS, gynae, endocrinologist, physician, or other specialist, and your work information, whether you are from government, private, corporate, or an NGO. So once you have put down your choice, we move to the poll 2. So the poll 2 is talking about menopause hormone therapy awareness. Once you have submitted, poll 2 ends, and we move to poll 3. And this will be the end of our survey on midlife. We can now move on with ma'am's presentation.
Yeah, so coming back, I hope all of you are with me. And we are going to now come to the last part of this session. I have talked about a little bit about the basics pharmacotherapy of the menopause hormone therapy, but how are we going to make it really implementable in practice? And that is how the next part of the presentation is going to be how we approach the use of MHT. Now, the minute a woman walks into your clinic, you have to think of two factors. One is menopause and one is aging. So both together. And then you decide whether this woman has symptoms of menopause or she's absolutely healthy and she doesn't have any symptoms, whether for menopause or any disease. Then you start thinking about talking to her only about the preventive health. But if she is symptomatic and she has some problems, then you have to treat her. And if she has symptoms, you have to also assess her risk for different kinds of diseases. So you have to check when was the last period, whether she is in a premenopause, late menopause transition, or more than 12 months of period. So only when she doesn't have a period for more than 12 months, then she's called a natural menopause. And the combination which Dexamethasone has 1 mg of 17-beta estradiol and 100 milligrams of progesterone 30 days every single day is actually a continuous combined regime. And I'm going to come back to it again. So we have to do the annual examination, which is very important, conduct all the basic tests, which are very, very important, and also the pap smears, the HPV, never forget doing the breast examination, checking the blood pressure, if possible. And as an indication, you're going to check the ultrasound and the ultrasound of the ovaries and the DEXA for checking the bone mineral density. The waist circumference is very important. Just the BMI is not going to help you. We know the increase in the waist circumference is actually a signal for testing more vigilantly for the metabolic disorders. So then once you know, you have an idea about this woman, then you create a management plan. So you divide these women into again to two groups. One group is those women who have no menopausal symptoms. And then they are again subdivided into four groups. That is, they are healthy women with no symptoms, just preventive health. Women with risk factors for disease, no symptoms, but you start doing a little more investigations. Like, they walk in and you find her blood pressure is very high. Then the family history is there. Then you start checking them a little more. Women who come to you, no problem, and you find that the blood sugar is high. Then you start treating the disease. And women with comorbidities, no symptoms, again, the same thing, you have to treat the disease. So at menopause, it's not just about hormone therapy, but it is looking at the woman in totality. Now, women with menopausal symptoms, you're going to first do the preventive care. With symptoms, you're going to start the hormone therapy if she is healthy, no problems. But if she doesn't have a disease, but she's at a risk for disease, or you have uncovered a disease in her like diabetes or hypertension, you're going to weigh the benefits and risks for this each woman and decide what kind of treatment she needs. And women who are already come with a problem, say somebody comes with migraine or somebody comes with migraine with aura, then you again decide for her whether she can be given the treatment or cannot be given the treatment. So that is how you're going to decide. But generally, the most beneficial effect is symptom relief, urogenital atrophy, bone health, premature menopause, and early menopause. The expanded indications are, if you start early, it may have a good effect on the collagen, it may help the CVS, it may help the bone, it may help atrophy of the connective tissues, the intervertebral disc, and definitely it helps in the entire quality of life, the sleep, the sexual dysfunction. So there are so many more health areas in the body which are helped by MHT versus other medications. Say for depression, for anxiety, you give the antidepressants. At menopause transition, hormone therapy probably would be a better option than giving them antidepressants. For bone health, again, MHT versus the bisphosphonates, MHT would again score. So that is how you have to decide the woman who needs this particular treatment. Clear contraindications are estrogen-dependent cancers, established cardiovascular disease, active liver disease, unexplained vaginal bleeding, and high risk for thrombosis, personal history of thrombosis. These are the only situations where MHT is contraindicated. Rest all are relative contraindications. There are, like I said, there could be a possible benefits of hormone therapy. So it needs to be individualized, personalized, and tailor-made. And the risk assessment models for the breast, you have to assess the risk for cancer before you prescribe hormone therapy, and that can be done online by an online model. CVD risk assessment, we use the Indian Menopause Society aggressively. We are promoting the WHO model, which is a very simple card which you can use. Any paramedical, the patient herself can document it there. Even the osteoporosis, we're using the simple OSTA. Muscle health is checked by the SAR. So this is how you're going to do a risk assessment for different areas of the body. So just like how you're going to check the blood pressure, you're going to check the lipid profile. So these assessment tools are very, very important once you're prescribing the therapy. This is an example as to how you do the risk assessment, the CVD risk assessment, and then you decide whether it can be given or cannot be given. Assess the baseline risk for venous thromboembolism and the osteoporosis risk by the simple chart. And then finally, you're going to put them all in the simple table. All this is there on the clinical practice guidelines of by the Indian Menopause Society 1990-20 Journal of Midlife Health. So whatever I have spoken is all explained very clearly, and anybody can access it and actually start practicing it. So there are different regimes. The continuous sequential regime is the one which we commonly use before the woman, if the woman has not stopped her periods and she's got irregular periods and suffering from symptoms, and we want to start therapy, then it has to be continuous sequential hormone therapy, where estrogen is given every single day and progesterone is given only in the last 14 days. If a woman doesn't have a uterus, then you're going to give only estrogen, no progesterone. Simple estrogen, no progesterone. But if she has a uterus, then it is in the early postmenopause, you're giving continuous sequential hormone therapy. And in the later half, when 1 year postmenopause, you can give a continuous combined regime. And this can be oral or transdermal. That means you're giving both estrogen and progesterone in a fixed drug combination every single day without a break in the tablet. And so this is what the 17 beta estradiol 1 mg and the progesterone 100 mg, this tablet is all about. So in the perimenopause, this is what we're giving. Postmenopause, it is the continuous combined regime. And I end my talk inviting all the gynecologists to be a part of this Indian Midlife Registry, which is a fully digital registry. And the scientific partner is Mediva. And in fact, out of this registry, we are now coming out with 2 papers, which we are trying to get them ready for publication. The registry, anybody can join in anytime and anybody can leave anytime, and it's a 10-year-long registry. So the conclusions are the option of MHT should be available to all recently menopausal women. No woman needs to suffer from menopause-related hot flushes. No woman needs to suffer from genitourinary syndrome of menopause. MHT is appropriate for the prevention and treatment of menopause-related osteoporosis. MHT is good for the heart if initiated early. MHT does not cause breast cancer. The risk of DVT and stroke, of course, can be managed. So thank you very much. And that's the slogan of the Indian Menopause Society.
Thank you, Dr. Meeta ma'am, for such a valuable insight that we have all gained today. I'll request Mr. Arvind Singh from our medical team. He'll be talking about MEMA, the latest MHT, which has been launched by Jagsonpal Pharma. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the discussion on compounded bioidentical also. You really clearly defined all the things, and thank you so much for that in-depth insight on that specific confusion related to the details. Thank you so much, Dr. Meeta ma'am, for same. So to manage vasomotor symptoms presenting one daily combination MEMUP, the combination therapy of progesterone and estrogen, help her move beyond the disruptive impact of hot flashes and proven to reduce the frequency and severity of moderate to severe VMS. Memup, progesterone 100 mg, estradiol hemihydrate 1 mg in soft gelatin capsule. Extraordinary care with Memup addresses multiple aspects of menopause, relief from moderate to severe VMS, and reduce symptoms by 76%. Endometrial protection mitigates the potential risk associated with estrogen therapy alone. Doses are 1 capsule daily in evening with food. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Deepika. Thank you, Dr. Mita.
We can all have the question answer session. There's a question, any specific book on menopause for practice? So ma'am has already given that. Till how long can one have MHT if there's no contraindication to MHT?
Yeah, if there is no contraindication, actually you can continue as long as the woman and you are comfortable in prescribing it.
Oh, very good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question. Sometimes this perimenopausal women also facing this VMS-related symptoms. So this current therapy, the progesterone estrogen combination, it can be utilized there also if the patient is properly examined. What's your recommendation or suggestion?
Yeah. Now, this is one place where you cannot use this continuous combined regime. Now, supposing Jacksonpal comes up with a formulation where you have 1 milligram of estrogen in that blister, and every day 1 mg of estrogen, and the last 14 days only you're giving 100 mg of progesterone. Only in the last 14 days. That is called the sequential therapy. And that
Sequential.
is when it can be prescribed. Actually, this combination memo that you have come up with should be prescribed 1 year post-menopause. You have to tell everybody, otherwise your product will get into disrepute for the simple reason that when you're prescribing this at that particular time, already the women's hormones are going very haywire. They go up and down. And when you're adding this daily regime, it doesn't fit into the levels which have to fluctuate in the normal cycle. So they start bleeding very erratically, and then they end up with unnecessary hysterectomies.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Added question to this one. In menopausal women, where it may be just 6 months without menses, but the FSH values are more than 40. Is in that case, because I reviewed in some studies, they are mentioning this thing. Is it possible to utilize this combination if the FSH value is more than 40?
If that is indicating menopause, but
Yeah, correctly.
we don't go by one report. FSH one report we don't go, because the FSH suddenly can be 40 and sometimes it can come down to less than 10 also. And that is why we go by clinical symptoms rather than by the FSH values, which should not be utilized to start or monitor therapy.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. There's a lot of confusion for these things. Thank you so much to clarify this. Thank you.
And one other question in the Q&A box, ma'am. Can you tell about the use of MHT in chronic diseases, particularly in autoimmune diseases like SLE?
Yeah, so that is a wonderful question because it is the toughest decision you can make. So that is where it's not a simple thing to answer in one line. So you have to have a risk assessment for her. Her risk for developing thromboembolism, her risk for developing a cardiovascular event, her risk for developing stroke. Because this is what we are worried about in SLE. And if she has low risk, if the SLE has been well controlled and it's not a full-blown picture, they have to understand that complications can happen. She can develop a venous thromboembolism by giving an oral MHT. Then in those situations, definitely not the oral tablets. Even if you decide to prescribe the MHT in this SLE patients, you would go for a transdermal preparation and not an oral one.
So in case if there are no more questions, we can have the list displayed over here, and we'll then request ma'am to give out the names of 5 lucky winners. Ma'am, it could be 7 also. So ma'am, you have to pick out the number 1 to 29. 7 numbers we need from you.
Yeah, so we'll start with 5.
5.
Then 10.
10,
19,
19,
23,
23,
28, 22, one more, 14.
All right, that's done. So,
Done.
Amit, please display these names, list of names, so we can know who are the winners. Number 10, Beena Tandon. Number 19 is Ranjit Kumar Nayak. Number 22, Sarita Gulati. Number 23, Nazma Ashraf. Number 28, Shweta Saxena. And number 14, Asha Agarwal. Congratulations to all the winners.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so very much, ma'am. A
Thank-
token of appreciation will be delivered to the winners through our sales team.
So thank you all of you. Thank you attendees, the Jackson Pal, the entire team for having put this together and also having the poll. Thank you so much.
And now that we've had our Q&A also, we move on to the next webinar that we'll be having. That will be on 30th August. This is Build Your Bones, It's Never Too Late, again on menopause. This is our ongoing webinar series of menopause dialogues, which is conducted regularly by My Sakhi. My Sakhi is our CSR initiative of Jackson Pal. Please do visit our website mysakhi.in, and then you can explore more on our women's health initiatives through our CSR initiative. We thank you all for joining. You can scan this QR code to reach this website, or you can also log into mysakhi.in, and we thank you all for joining in today.